Welcome guys, good afternoon. It's good having you all here, and we're glad that we're getting very good feedback on this one. So Mihika has agreed to join us today because of all the good feedback that's coming. Otherwise Mihika wouldn't join us.
Oh, please.
So privilege is ours. But I'm Hersh, this is Sajeet sir, Sajeet Manghat, and that's Mihika Barve. And today we're going to focus in on the theme called Trump trade. But before that, I want to quickly try and alert you all. Please give us thoughts in comments. We're going to start taking some of the questions that you all put up, taking perspective, or rather discussing that internally. It's good if we get more comments, and we'll take the top 3 stocks in terms of the number of comments on each stock. We'll try and discuss the top 3 stocks with the maximum number of comments, and we'll try and discuss that at the end. So do send us and do interact with us so that we get a perspective on what you all are thinking and feeling. So thank you. But with that, let's start off. Mihika, you are set to do a piece with regard to Trump trade on closing today between 2 and 3:30. If you watch our show, you'll know. But what are those stocks that one needs to keep on their radar? Because President Trump gets elected today. What is it? Where will the play be?
So you can take it from a perspective of multiple sectors, and there's still some uncertainty regarding some sectors because while policies have been proposed, how they follow through, is what we need to watch out for. There's some policies that can be good, but some policies can be negative. When you talk about what sectors we're going to focus on, first is IT. We also have pharma, we have the auto and companies, we have something like even the oil and gas companies from a macro perspective that could see some benefits or some negatives. We also have textile companies, and then your solar module companies, which are the ones that have recently been listed, which is Warrior Energies and Premier Energies. Now, one thing you need to know about Warrior and Premier Energies, they have big US exposure, especially Warrior Energies. Around 50% of their revenues in FY24 did come from US. These two companies are even setting up localized manufacturing, but then that's where the tariff part comes of it. Trump has said 60% tariffs on China, but also 10 to 20% tariffs on the rest of the world if he feels like doing so. So then you have a negative but also a positive impact. So it's basically on how you follow through. Only on China is very good for India because we've been increasing our exports over there. But something even a little bit on India in terms of an import tariff could be negative, because then your profitability for these companies right now, we're getting much more profits exporting than what they're getting domestically.
So I think before we go into sector specific stocks in Trump trade, we need to set up the Trump trade. What is the Trump trade basically? It basically is nothing but the policies of Donald Trump 2.0.
Yes.
And how it's going to impact various emerging market countries, including some of the developed countries, which is there based on the policy, whether it's a tariff, whether it's any other reciprocal duties that he's going to put in. But more important from a stock market's point of view, it is more about foreign inflows or outflows, which is there. Now look at from November, December and January so far, we have seen an outflow of roughly 1 lakh crores. In the market, little more than 1 lakh crores in the market, and that's happening since November 7th when the results came in, and it's been still going, and that's one reason for that being is the dollar strengthening, which is happening, and that is creating a lot of panic for many of the policymakers, especially central bank governors, because their policies have gone for toss because they don't know how to manage this policy, and if this dollar strengthening which is happening on the back of Trump coming back to power, and what he's going to do, it is anticipated that he will sign off on executive orders of more than 100 such things, which is going to happen today by midnight. Second half, which he's going to do, and that implication will have a ripple effect on many countries. On the other hand, he's been meeting businesses, so it's very clear that Trump is about tax cuts and tariff increases. Simple. That's a mild way of saying it, how it's going to set it up.
So why is the dollar strengthening? Because you have investors, foreign investors in India, emerging markets, they're selling equities, they're selling various assets and moving towards the dollar. Because of Trump's protectionist policies, you can see more traction, more people buying the dollar, which is why you'll see the dollar index has spiked. And that is the significance of dollar strength. And that will also lead to rupee weakness, which means that exporters will likely make more money when they actually export products. It's just for context,
But
just for
I have a
context.
question. You talked about, shifting flows. They're pulling away from Indian equities. There's also been talked about because of, Trump's stance on China and increased exports. Could we see an outflow from China, towards India and, those inflows coming back in?
So before November 7th and after November 7th,
Yeah.
let's break it up in that way. Before November 7th, because in September is when China started doing stimulus talk.
Yeah.
But it was just a talk, it wasn't any stimulus as such. Now people estimate that China is holding up the stimulus, waiting for what Trump is going to do. But in the meantime, what China has done is gradually allowed the yuan to depreciate, and the yuan has depreciated more than the rupee. So इसका मतलब ये क्या है कि रुपी अभी भी relatively stronger है yuan के मुताबिक, and we are when you say exports, benefit of export, वो benefit of export नहीं मिलेगा इंडिया को अगर रुपी स्ट्रॉन्गर रहेगा युआन के खिलाफ, क्योंकि युआन 5.5% गिरा है डॉलर के खिलाफ और रुपी गिरा है 3.5% डॉलर के खिलाफ. सो अभी भी रिलेटिवली वीकर है, बट ये वीकनेस भी हमारे लिए बहुत एक्सपेंसिव है क्योंकि क्रूड बढ़ रहा है, बिकॉज वी आर अ नेट इंपोर्टर ऑफ क्रूड. सो हमारे लिए वो एक चैलेंज बन जाता है आगे जाके, क्योंकि क्रूड जो है 81-82 तक जा रहा है.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2-3 things here. One is, what will Trump land up doing? He will land up likely increasing tariffs. To kind of probably break it down even further. So if tariffs were to go up, inflation in the US will also get impacted, might go up. And therefore you will have rates which will likely be higher for longer. And which is why buy the dollar is the big trade which is currently playing out. This is broadly the hypothesis at this point. But in terms of whether this trade will actually play out the way the market is anticipating, and I want probably Sajeet sir to weigh in on this. Do you believe that it's overbaked?
It's not, because there are a lot of fundamental reasons for some of the sectors. Let's take IT for one, right?
Sure.
We have seen IT में there is a positive which is coming in the form of discretionary spends.
Correct.
इस क्वार्टर में सब ने बोला है कि है, बट Q4 का जो आउटलुक है सबका म्यूटेड है.
करेक्ट.
सबके सब म्यूटेड है. सब बोल रहे हैं कि डिस्क्रिशनरी स्पेंड पिकअप होगा और हो रहा है, बट इसका जो फ्रूट है वो अगले साल आएगा उसमें.
And they're not also commenting about further rate cuts, because now with Trump coming through, he wants more control in terms of the rate cut cycle, and your discretionary spending in the US is linked to the rate cuts, and then you have also Indian stocks getting impacted.
So if the pause in interest rate happens, then there is a pause in discretionary spend also which comes into play. And that's one of the negative for Indian IT companies. H1B visa is
they're
not
much more insulated now.
Because आज के डेट में 60-70% of local hiring हो रही है, हर कंपनी मेजर कंपनी कर रही है, तो that's not an issue. The positive side also is there that because if tax cuts is going to come in, which Besant also spoke about during his confirmation hearings, कि ये 2017 के जो cuts हैं वो हमको retain करने हैं या extend करने हैं, तो उसके वजह से जो एडिशनल सेविंग्स होंगी कंपनीज की, उसमें कैपेक्स आएगा, उसमें IT स्पेंड्स आ जाएंगे, इसके अंदर सब कुछ आएगा, तो दैट उसका जो बिजनेस है वो इंडियन IT कंपनीज को मिलेगा और एग्जिस्टिंग प्लेस वेंडर्स को मिलेगा. तो दैट इज़ एन एक्सपेक्टेशन विच इज़ देयर, बट एट द सेम टाइम टैरिफ हाइक होगा तो इन्फ्लेशनरी इम्पैक्ट होगा, और वो उससे जो आपका जो डिस्क्रिशनरी जो है वो नहीं होगा. अब ये लेके चलिए कि सारे कंपनीज ने बोला है कि मेगा डील्स अभी अगले 3-4 क्वार्टर के लिए नहीं होंगे. इन्फोसिस ले लो, TCS ले लो, HCL टेक ले लो, विप्रो ले लो, सब ये बोल रहे हैं. जब इसका मतलब क्या है? मतलब ये है कि अगर सपोज TCS 8 से 9 बिलियन डॉलर का TCV मतलब टोटल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट वैल्यू करता है हर क्वार्टर, पहले एक मेगा डील उसको आके चंक ले जाता था, अब उसके लिए उसको ज़्यादा मेहनत करनी पड़ेगी,
Yes.
उतना 8 से 10 बिलियन डॉलर का लेकर आने के लिए। या इन्फोसिस ले लीजिए $2.5 बिलियन, या विप्रो ले लीजिए $3.5 बिलियन। The amount of work they have to put in to get that TCV on a quarterly basis, it's very high and very high ask for them. So
Right.
that is a challenge for Indian IT companies, and इसलिए आपको देख रहे हैं कि IT companies अभी थोड़े से करेक्ट हो रहे हैं.
And these are companies which have strong amount of revenues from the US.
Why don't you
Yeah.
give us that split? And
So-
not just in IT, give us pharma, auto,
Yeah.
oil and gas. You've got all of those
Yeah.
here, and we'll put it up as well separately. But
Yeah.
why don't you give?
So I'll
the
start
viewers
off with IT. This is as of Q3 FY25. We have all the earnings come out for the IT majors. TCS 52% of their total revenues in Q3 from Americas. Infosys 58% from North America region. HCL Tech 64%. Wipro almost 63%. LTI Mindtree, largest of the chunk, 74%, and Tech Mahindra 22% odd exposure in terms of Q3 revenues to the US. That's a very significant part.
22% भी इसलिए क्योंकि they have a larger exposure to European markets, जहाँ पर BT का उनका exposure है, but European markets are also very slow because your UK, Germany, France, all three major economies are going through political uncertainties because of the the change in government which is happening and the slowness in economy which is coming in there. So वो सब उधर है. Pharma is an interesting one.
Pharma has two things. One, pushing for US local manufacturing, which will hurt the generic Indian companies, but also they want to expand the beneficiaries of their Medicare program, which in the end, till the US manufacturing catches up, it's going to benefit the generic business. You have something like a Dr. Reddy's, 45% of their FY25 revenues was from US. Lupin, 37% of their total revenues. Sun Pharma, 32%. Cipla 28% and Torrent Pharma the lowest of the pack at 10%, but these are all companies with significant US exposure in terms of their revenues.
और यहाँ पर एक important चीज हर्ष ये है कि there is an alternate supply chain is coming up, which basically means what? It basically means that आपके जो APIs, formulations वगैरह जो है वो सब चीजें जो पहले चाइना से आती थी डायरेक्टली, अब वो इंडिया में बन के इंडिया से आएगी या कोई और कंट्री से, नॉन चाइना से, चाइना +1 या चाइना +2 का जो स्ट्रैटेजी हम बोल रहे हैं उसके थ्रू आ रहा है. और अब अगर यूएस में अगर लोकल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग होगा जैसे मीका बोल रही है, सो उसके जो इंग्रेडिएंट्स हैं, API हो गए, जो भी हो गए, केमिकल्स हो गए, वो इंडियन स्पेशलिटी केमिकल्स कंपनीज बनाएंगे जो कि who were going through a very bad patch for last 18 months. So there is a revival that we'll see in some of those specialty chemical companies.
Before we go on to the next sector per se, so you've tracked a lot of budgets, a lot of US presidencies, a lot of elections. Who has been the best US president for Indian markets?
Who has been the best president for Indian markets? Trump has been good for Indian markets.
Yeah.
That way.
I was just looking at the numbers, by the way.
Yeah.
2016 to 2020, you had the Nifty rally from around 7,000 to around 11,000-12,000. So it's a very solid rally that we saw in that 5-year period.
Yeah.
But it's largely in line. It's a 14-15% kind of return.
And it doesn't matter much because उस समय there were the dynamics have changed.
Very different.
Yeah.
Look at the biggest change.
You feel the correlation is low.
You look at inflation.
Yeah.
That is the biggest crux, right?
The
game has changed.
Lower.
Game has changed with regard to where inflation is concerned. Earlier, inflation was very, very benign. Right now, you're running nearly a 3% inflation number.
So
that is not comfortable.
So that's a totally different thing. आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि जब ट्रम्प 2016 में आया था उस समय
the landscape was different.
क्या था, अभी लैंडस्केप चेंज हो गया, उसके बीच में कोविड आके चला गया. वो उस कोविड ने
but markets have done very well.
But do you think that suppose 10 years ago how Indian markets took cues from global markets is much different than what we do today?
Indian markets do take cues from US markets, but they are also detached. In 99-2000, when the Nasdaq used to go up, Indian market used to go up. Then Dow falls, Indian market used to fall.
Yeah.
अभी ऐसा नहीं है. अभी it's much more muted and much more
self-sustained maybe.
Sustained because Indian markets have their own now depth.
Yeah.
उस समय foreign flows बहुत कम हुआ करते थे. बहुत
as a component of
total बहुत high होते थे और उसको बहुत influence करते थे.
Yes.
But we still get hurt by the foreign outflow.
Today we are not getting hurt by the foreign outflow. We are not getting the momentum because the foreign outflow, foreign inflows are not there.
Okay.
Let me put it this way. तो अगर आप 1 लाख करोड़ एक मार्केट से निकाल देते हो, तो वो जो मोमेंटम है भागने की वो नहीं है. आपको डोमेस्टिक मार्केट उतना ही पैसा वापस दे रहा है आपको. मीन्स अगर आप देखोगे FI selling is matched by almost matched by DI buy which is there. बट वो जो मोमेंटम है, जो लिक्विडिटी जो पुश करती है, वो पुश नहीं मिल रहा है इस मार्केट पे. इसलिए आप देखते हो कि सुबह प्री मार्केट में 0.5% ऊपर जाकर फिर नीचे आ जाता है, फिर ऊपर जाता है फिर नीचे आ जाता है. बिकॉज पीपल आर सेलिंग एट हायर लेवल्स एंड बुकिंग प्रॉफिट्स. बिकॉज people are sitting at a lot of profits actually.
Yes.
Speaking. Despite the fact that many of the top companies have corrected by 20 to 30%, they're still sitting on profits. So, वो profit booking हो रही है.
Yeah.
And what happens when that turns will be fascinating to watch. Once these, supposing the markets go into a larger correction, and if these people who are sitting on larger profits start panicking even a little bit, that's when I think it will start becoming crucial as to how everyone starts
The
responding.
conversation then maybe
The
needs to be
domestic
that, is it
investor
only
starts
profit
responding.
booking or less confidence, right? Because then you never know how it's playing out.
So, अगर आप देखोगे and Hersh can talk about that fact also, कि म्यूचुअल फंड्स में SIP फ्लोज जो इम्पैक्ट होते हैं वो 1 या 2 महीने के कंसिस्टेंट मार्केट गिरने पे होते हैं. मतलब लोग SIP रोक देते हैं देखने के लिए कि मार्केट कहाँ जा रहा है. आप इंश्योरेंस में जाके देखोगे तो वहाँ पर 1 साल के बाद वो असर देखने को मिलता है. यूलिप्स की बात कर रहे हैं हम. कभी इस बार आप देखोगे सबके यूलिप्स अच्छे नंबर आए हैं सबके. एंड एवरीवन इज प्रोडक्ट मिक्स सब चेंज हो गया यूलिप की तरफ उधर. पर वो यूलिप का जो चेंज होगा ना वो 1 साल के बाद आएगा उधर, अगर मार्केट्स कंसिस्टेंटली फ्लैट रहेंगे या गिरेंगे यहाँ से. सो इंश्योरेंस कंपनी का जो मॉडल जो है वो देखने लायक होगा कि भाई अगर आप 3-4 महीने में आपको मार्केट कहीं नहीं जाते हुए दिख रहा है तो आपको सडनली आपको इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज अंडर परफॉर्म करना शुरू कर देंगे क्योंकि लोग विल स्टार्ट
So we've dissected a little bit. I'll just try to put it in a nutshell and put all the takeaways together. One is likely rates are going to be higher for longer. Second is therefore flows will continue to be under some bit of pressure. You will have some bit of inflation if tariffs were to go up. In fact, inflation may be a big risk if tariffs go up in a big fashion, right? And some Indian companies which will benefit in terms of revenue just because the dollar will become stronger. That is one. And second, if any tariffs are put on China, then it will be a double benefit for some of these Indian companies. We are going to flag those numbers off in terms of revenue contribution of various sectors. Now, one question that's coming through is, will jewelry stocks benefit from Trump 2.0?
I don't think. Means हमारा export to US
our consumption in India is only so
India is
high.
Very large. But more than that, now US is also a large consumer of lab-grown diamonds, if I'm not wrong. Right?
It is, yes.
So processing यहाँ पर हो रहा है, यहाँ से दुबई जाता है, दुबई से US जाता है. So that is a route normally they take.
So you may have specific stock.
Maybe
Something like a Web of Global which has presence over there might benefit.
उतना नहीं है.
But something like a Kalyan which has domestic
consumer related नहीं है.
Correct, but it's not core consumer. That's what I
maybe
think.
something related
Sajeet
to prices. Gold prices, US dollar.
But that is a function of a percentage of the price anyway, and it also.
If there's a volatility, then people will start switching to gold.
Correct.
So gold prices will go up.
But not stocks per se.
And if gold prices go up, demand comes down. Remember that as well. Some bit. I'm not saying absolute terms, but some bit of demand will come off. Some bit of the shine will come off, and your making charges go up, and therefore, so it all offsets net. Jewelry stocks, not so sure what kind of impact. Specific bottom-up stories will always exist, but that's the conclusion. Now, in terms of one more, we have Mohammad Doadwala, who's asking, what do you think will be the effect of a tariff hike on China for the Indian chemical sector? You've spoken about this, Mohammad, but nonetheless.
Just to reiterate, there is a lot of PLI at work for some of the chemical companies to manufacture in India. Last 1-2 साल से वो it's working, and we are still a little away from being self-sufficient in that kind of thing. So जो alternative supply chain channel की हम बात कर रहे हैं, यहाँ पर China Plus One में Indian companies will be more involved. अब जितनी स्पेशलिटी केमिकल्स की कंपनी है वो सब के सब they will see or are getting inquiries, and they will see sales going to US from India. जैसे ही चाइना टैरिफ्स आएंगे, Chinese
will come to India.
The demand will migrate to India and other countries where these capacities are getting built.
So if it comes to India,
but
there's a negative impact.
There's a but there because अगर डॉलर स्ट्रेंथन होता है तो अगर आपके टैरिफ बढ़ा दिए और टैरिफ and dollar is appreciated and China goes for a massive depreciation of their currency, then you have a challenge because you have to meet that. Because आज के डेट में भी केमिकल कंपनीज बाहर से सामान लेती हैं, इंपोर्ट करती हैं, तो उनका कॉस्ट बढ़ेगा, चाहे सेल्स बढ़े पर वो जो मार्जिन प्रोफाइल है ना वो हिट हो जाएगा.
करेक्ट
उनका. सो वो ये डायनामिक्स बहुत ही
there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of uncertainty on how the tariffs will go through.
Positive for chemical companies, profitable for chemical companies, but whether is it going to be margin accretive, it depends upon how US is imposing tariffs and how China is reacting by using its currency.
No.
There's going to be a lot of moving parts here. Frankly, it's going to be very difficult to be able to answer exactly what impact what space will have. Will it be a China-specific tariff? Will it be an India-specific tariff? Which product will the tariff attract? What is priority for President Trump? What is not priority in terms of product, service? All of those factors will likely impact the way he frames his policies. Also, is it phased implementation? What happens to the dollar versus the rupee? Is rupee more competitive than the Chinese currency or the Japanese currency? All of those will start to play out in my opinion.
A lot of moving parts.
And therefore, it's going to be very, very difficult to tell. But it's going to be a very volatile environment. That for one, I think is certain.
This week is going to be a volatile environment because one, starting Tuesday morning, the market will start assessing the executive orders.
Yes.
उसका इम्पैक्ट क्या है ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन में या ग्लोबल कमोडिटीज़ में या ग्लोबल कंट्रीज़ के टैरिफ्स पे, इन्फ्लेशन रेट कितना रहेगा, वो इकोनॉमीज, देयर विल बी लॉट ऑफ रिपोर्ट्स दैट विल कम आउट एंड से कि ओके दिस इज इन्फ्लेशनरी इन नेचर, हाउ मच इट इज़, कितना हम क्योंकि क्रूड पे डिपेंडेंट हैं तो उसका इम्पैक्ट क्रूड में होगा, तो क्रूड का जब होगा क्रूड डेरिवेटिव्स में होगा उसका इम्पैक्ट.
I want to talk about crude because you've seen Trump policy proposals on how he wants to end the Russia-Ukraine or Middle Eastern conflicts. That could maybe take out some geopolitical risk premium from crude prices. There are expectations of low commodity prices. Yes, crude derivatives perfect, but there's also a stock impact for something like our IOCL, BPCL, HPCL, Hindustan Petroleum, Bharat Petroleum, where we get petrol on a daily basis from. Low prices are very good. We saw that in a big part of Q3 FY25. Low prices are good for these stocks because their marketing margins expand. Because right now our petrol and diesel prices are fixed. We are a net crude importer. All these companies are buying crude oil. So if they're buying crude oil at a lower price, very basic logic, their margins get expanded because from your cost perspective it's coming down, but your sales, the rate at which you're making your sale is the same. So it's good for these companies.
Midstream and downstream companies.
Yeah.
But upstream companies के लिए तो ऐसे challenging है basically because वहाँ पर
they're going to make less for everything they sell.
They sell.
Of course.
And just to give a idea of the Russian sanctions which have come in. This time what the US has done is not only sanctioned against one or two companies which are in, but they have sanctioned against the containers who ship crude from there, and these containers cannot be easily replicated or replaced. Simple as that, because the crude is of a specific category which requires a specific category of containers or ships which are there, and उन ships की वजह से there are. I was reading 33 ships are there which transport that, and 31 of them are now idle. Which basically means that Russian पिछले बार जैसे तब रशिया के ऊपर sanctions लगे थे तो क्रूड तो freely move कर रहा था, पर इस बार वो भी move नहीं कर सकता क्योंकि आपने movement ही बंद कर दिया. So now the pressure
so shipping companies will get impacted positively and negatively.
So that's the pressure which
that's the other one.
US is building on Russia, saying that okay, you are doing proxy selling.
Does that change under the Trump era?
Trump is trying to force Russia to come on the table.
Right.
And this would curtail his, Putin's cash flows.
Correct.
And so he will come on the table.
Correct.
That's what he's assuming. But Biden, while going, has made it very tough for Trump.
Yeah, exactly. And therefore, it's a tricky environment.
Because he has to go back to the.
But US is also making a good amount of oil.
But last 5 हफ्ते से US inventories are falling. So the Trump is also saying that I'm going to impose tax on Canada for oil, right? So वो बहुत ही tricky situation है और crude is going to be it's going to be hell of a ride for crude, I think, for next 2 weeks.
Interesting. Now completely out of time, but I'm going to take the quick 1 or 2 questions which have come. One is on Wari, and it's a tricky environment here as well because President Trump is of the view that climate change is not a reality, and therefore renewables. 30 seconds, Mihika. What's the impact like in your view? You've done a KYC on Wari as well. So, by the way, catch that
about Wari
for a larger
Energies
conversation.
Here.
Yes.
They're making solar modules, solar cells. 50% of their revenues are from the US. A tariff on China is very good for these companies. You have more share in the US. On tariff on rest of the world, which includes India, 10 to 20%, a slight hit in terms of their profitability and unit economics. But their management is very optimistic, and these companies are also building localized plants. So in the next 1 to 2 years, they won't have to export. They'll be building and having these things made locally and then getting the benefit of that. So dual impact depends on how tariffs are imposed and how much of a tariff is imposed.
Well,
I think a large part of it is based on this.
The top 10 banks which were working on climate-based transition, they've abandoned that in the US. And so is some of the big companies which were working on those net zero carbon footprint, which everyone
and advertising it.
And advertising it. Now they are abandoning all that in Trump regime 2.0. So उसका impact कितना?
Will the E of ESG change? Will it just be social and governance? Anyway, so thank you so much, guys, for joining us. It's been a great fireside chat and it's been a great conversation. We hope you found this interesting. Give us your thoughts in the comments below, and just stay tuned. We'll come back to you tomorrow with regard to what else we're going to be discussing. So stay tuned.
Especially, I think Trump orders के impact क्या होगा?
हाँ.
There'll be some official.
If there is something,
there'll be
पता
something
नहीं on
official.
day 0 only.
You never know.
He's talking about 100 executive orders. इसमें एक
Actually being signed.
इसमें एक
he's
going to
What?
sign.
But यार वो बात करता है
पर
जब
TikTok तो करेगा ही करेगा. TikTok तो करेगा ही
actual
करेगा.
TikTok
आएगा
वापस
तो
भी तो आया ना.
TikTok
18 hours that ban was effective.
अभी
14 hours. No, it's back
अभी-
online.
अभी इसने लिखा wait for Trump to come.
90 days.
90 days का वो है इसका.